destroyed buildings.
All right, you're welcome back. Now, recent United Nations Children Emergency Fund data indicates that 3 million children may not be able to attend school this year in Borno State. 57% of schools in Borno State remain shut, and that more than 2,000 teachers are either killed or missing in the theater of war.
Now, with that report is brought to you by our TVC News correspondent in the Northeast, and the you went on a fact-finding mission to discover how much damage war has inflicted on the education sector in Borno State.
Destroyed buildings line the streets of Borno State in northeastern Nigeria, a product of Boko Haram's 8-year terror. Many of the buildings used to be schools, which were burnt by the group that sought to eliminate all that had to do with the Western education. The term Boko Haram translates to Western education is forbidden, and some of the group's targets were schools, banks, and office buildings. By 2014, Borno State, with 28 local government areas, was left with only 7 safe enough for people to live in, with the rest under Boko Haram's control. Men, women, children, and the aged trekked long distances to reach Maiduguri, the state capital, and the existing schools were used as temporary shelters for the hundreds of thousands of internally displaced persons who came from captured areas. Borno State Governor Hashim Shetima shared the impacts of the attacks on education.
Boko Haram destroyed 5,335 classrooms in 38 secondary schools, 501 primary schools, and 2 tertiary institutions of learning. They have destroyed 201 primary health care facilities and hospitals. Not only that, 1,630 water sources, including motorized boreholes, hand pump wells, were destroyed.
Teachers were either killed or missing during this period. Hundreds of abductions of students took place, mostly in remote areas of Kanduga, Bama, and in Chibok, where more than 200 schoolgirls were kidnapped from their hostels in April 2014, attracting global attention. Some of the girls who managed to escape are now in schools all over the world, and those recently released are being rehabilitated to attend school again. In internally displaced persons camps, children were given tutorials on the trees by kind-hearted teachers before non-governmental organizations improved learning through the provision of teachers and teaching materials. Today, the situation in the education sector in Borno State is better than it was a few years ago, but there are still challenges. UNICEF reports of the low turnout of students and the imbalance in the salaries of teachers. Inuwa Kubu is the Borno State Commissioner for Education.
We have a number of people, those that are displaced and those that are residing, that migrated and came into the metropolis. Some of them have not yet accessed school, which we have not captured. But all those that we have captured, that is both those within the communities and those within the internally displaced camps, we made provision for them. They are all in school.
Kubo talks about the partnership with UNICEF meant to improve education in the state.
They've really been one of those agencies that really came to our support, especially at our very trying period of this insurgency. So we have enjoyed their support, we are enjoying their support, and we are believing that we shall continue to enjoy this support.
The World Teachers' Day was recently celebrated worldwide, and TVC caught up with some of the teachers.
Insurgently, about 500 teachers were killed. This is the record available to us. There are the ones that we even doesn't know, but the ones that we have at the NUT headquarters is about 500 teachers.
I will impact the knowledge because we don't know tomorrow. We are doing it for the future. If today is not bright, tomorrow it will be bright. That is our prayer.
A recent promise the Borno state government fulfilled to hundreds of students affected by Boko Haram's terror was the payment of WAEC and NECO fees so they can access their results. The state government has been working hard to transform schools in Maiduguri, renovating old structures and building new ones. Amina is one of the internally displaced persons attending school in this government girls' school, and she feels happy being here.
The government is really trying on us, but we still need some things to be improved on. Like now, we are having science teachers, but they are still not enough for us. We need additional science students, and also the buildings.
There are still thousands of school-age children who remain in IDP camps and communities not easily accessible, and there is still a long way to go in getting them educated. But there is hope, as UNICEF is willing to assist Borno State in its drive to right the wrongs of the past.
All right, that's just paints a picture of what is happening with the children, not only in Borno State, but of course all across the northeast. And indeed, Nigeria, 10.5 million Nigerian children are out of school.
Yeah, Nigeria still remains number 2 when it comes to that ranking, with the number of children out of school, after Afghanistan.
And a huge chunk of that, of course, is in the northeast of Nigeria. Now we have the coordinator, education rights campaign, Hassan Taiwo, in the studio with us, is joining us this morning to discuss this. Good morning. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah. Right. And of course, we're expected to be joined by Kolomi Dala in Borno. Our correspondent there will be looking at this together. And of course, Inua Kubo, Commissioner for Education, Borno State. All right, let's begin with you, Hassan, right here in the studio. UNICEF, according to UNICEF, there is a danger of creating a lost generation of children, threatening the children's future and the future of Nigeria. That is likely to be what we have on our hands if the situation doesn't change as quickly as possible.
That's certainly what we have on our hands. The Boko Haram conflict is actually one of the greatest conflicts in Africa in the last 20 years. In terms of the devastation it has wreaked. And one of that manifestation is in the number of children who are out of school. But I always like us to also understand that when we talk about the huge numbers of out-of-school children in the Northeast, it was a great phenomenon even before the Boko Haram crisis. So that what has happened is that the Boko Haram conflict has only made it worse, because the basis,
it was already a bad situation.
Which was made worse. What the basis for the ascendance of Boko Haram, with that completely reactionary ideology of Western education is forbidden, was the fact that public education never penetrated far in the Northeast over the past 50-something years of independence, on the basis of the underfunding of the sector by successive government. So that if we now have this crisis on our hands, the question we must ask is that, what do we do? Not only to ensure that this is not a lost generation, but that we also completely eliminate the conditions for any future insurgency to arise, not just in the Northeast, but across the country. I would also like to quickly make a point that in the other part of the country where we have not had any insurgents, we could also face this same kind of crisis in the next few years, because of the completely anti-poor education policies of government. Look at what is happening in Oyo State. Look at what is happening in Osun State. Look at what is happening even in Lagos State. We are having increasingly every year huge numbers of people, of young people, who are not able to go either from junior secondary school to senior, or to advance from the senior into tertiary education. What that means is that we are constantly creating on an annual basis thousands of people who have nowhere to go. And that is why we have the increasing spate of communal clashes and street courtism and gangsterism across our community. So it's a serious crisis we face.
Wow. Well, it's good to start seeing the pictures the way they are really as we get along. Let's bring in Kolomi Dala here, our correspondent in Borno State, to join us now. Kolomi, it's good to have you join us. Now, you have gone round some of these schools, spoken to teachers, spoken to parents and teachers, and even the government on the other hand. Now, give us a picture of what really is going on in the building or rebuilding of schools now, getting them back on their feet. What is going on?
Yes, actually, as it is today, most of the schools within Maiduguri capital is being renovated, and the government is doing a great effort in rebuilding and reconstructing new schools as well. This is to kind of absorb the large number of people, children that are out of school, that are in the internally displaced people's camp. They try to absorb them back into these new schools whereby they will have this basic education, because it is not in our own making that these children will have the opportunity of going back to their communities anytime soon, because it's not very realistic as we see, because most of the schools in northern Borno are all gone and nobody is even there, because we only have Dikwa that is there and Borungala, then a few other local government like Magumeri and Mobar, where people are just trying to settle back. But most of the children are in the IDP camps, where they have a kind of a small support from UNICEF, where they have this porta cabin kind of school where it takes only a few number of them. But most of them are just staying idle in the IDP camp. So majority of them are still out of school. But the government is doing a great effort by building new schools within the city center, whereby we've seen renovation of those destroyed schools being back to life again. But the population and attendance number is still very poor. But the commissioner has assured us that with time they will balance that number, because some of the schools are congested, while some you have very few students attending such schools.
Of course, we expect to speak with the commissioner himself to tell us their own side of it, if we have him there already. Okay, we don't have him. Let me stay with Kolomi Dala. Of course, UNICEF says it's been able to enroll some 750,000 children so far this year in northern Nigeria as a whole, not just in Borno State. Well, you know, they've set up some temporary or makeshift learning centers. Paint a picture of how far-reaching these interventions from UNICEF is and how it's helping, you know, how much confidence really do these children and, of course, their parents or guardians have to send them back to school?
Well, as we see, Maiduguri has been destroyed by this insurgency. Most of these children, as we are talking of, are orphans. And some of them are just there being taken care of by caregivers. Most of them is a pathetic story where you see a child has been in that camp for like 3 years. He doesn't even know where his parents are. So the caregivers are the ones guiding them. But UNICEF, in a way, are being able to employ more teachers within the internally displaced camp, because most of these, some of these people in the internally displaced camps were teachers in their previous communities before they were sacked from such areas. So they built some kind of porta cabin. They have this a kind of movable type of classrooms where the schools, the children can attend school within the IDP camp. But UNICEF, they are in Banki. They went to Banki. Bama is still under reconstruction. Nobody is there. That is the major focus now. But they try now. They are trying to get more support, whereby once Bama is back to life, where we have majority of the population in the IDP camp, that is in Dalori 1 and 2. When they shift these people back to Bama town, I think the number will deplete, and then we'll have most of them attending school.
All right. We still expect to connect with the Commissioner of Education in Borno State, Inua Kubo, as we get along. Now, Hassan, let me come back to you on this. Now, Kolomi mentioned earlier that some of these students, or many of them, are even orphans already. Now, if we create a scenario where building classrooms seem to be easy, as far as you have the budgets, the classrooms will be built. But the students, some of them, or the children, some of them don't have parents anymore. How they're going to survive, how to get to school, and how to ensure safety and learning and all of that. Just how difficult would it be to get the schools running with the students present and students ready to learn?
That can only be resolved when government goes back to what activists like us have been saying over the years, that education should be the public responsibility of government. Not just in terms of what is offered in schools, but the totality of the person who is receiving that education. Because we must go back again to how Nigeria itself was built up as a nation. Without the free education policy in the Western region, it would have been impossible for Western education to even start off in Nigeria on the basis it is today. Because yes, the children were not orphans in those days, but parents were not yet convinced of the benefit of education. So what did government do? To the extent that by independence, you are beginning to see huge enrollment. By the 1970s, government was faced with the question of building more schools. So that today, if you face a similar crisis in another form, we have to return to that example, which is that for those children now, they must become the complete, if I can use the word, property of the federal government. And they have done it for the kidnapped Chibok girls. We must also see how we do it for these children in their IDP camps. What that will mean is that they are not just put in schools, but that the totality of their needs, including in terms of feeding, in terms of clothing, in terms of access to health care, must be
the entire welfare.
The entire welfare.
Indeed, but of course we've heard that the children, especially this Borno children, are facing not just the issue of lack of education. There's a huge violence that they're facing, malnutrition, all kinds of diseases and all of that.
Those are,
it speaks to the point you're just making.
Because there is an additional UNICEF report that about 40,000 of those children at IDP camp, they face malnutrition. I mean, so that we're not just talking about access to education, but even that their access to life could be truncated. Survival. So that point must be clearly understood by government. We have to return back to the concept of free education, or providing education for anybody that needs it, and ensuring that when people go to school, there is something for them to do.
But all of this has to do with funding. UNICEF has said, you know, with all the budgets that's been set aside for them, they've only had access to 12% of the funds. So that in itself is a huge problem. Do you think government really has a political will to do right when it comes to ensuring that monies are provided to rehabilitate these children?
You are completely correct. I do not believe they do. They do not have the political will, one, to use the resources of this country to provide education. And even when they seek foreign assistance, they do also have the political will to ensure that these resources are judiciously utilized. Because there is the Safe Schools Initiative, a project worth $30 million, or thereabout, launched about 4 years ago. We need to ask the question, what has happened? Because on the side of all of these things is the narrative about how the rehabilitation funds of the Northeast is being siphoned by certain elements. We have had that report, so that the question of even when funds are available, how do you ensure they are properly utilized is very important. And we have always said it. There must be democratic control of the funds, the NUT, the teachers, the parents, civil society organizations and trade unions must be involved in the processes of ensuring that the resources provided are well utilized. Without this, we are going to end up, even when we have resources, in a situation where nothing actually is achieved.
All right. Let's bring in Kolomi Dala back in here. You have told us that you have assurances from the government as to their will to build more schools. But the situation in Borno State is really very critical, that requires a deliberate, more than just building schools. There has to be some deliberate effort. Is there some master plan or some kind of Marshall Plan set up by government, and with time frames and with signposting of different projects in the education sector?
Well, the government has not actually made them known to us, but what we see here is we've seen the government, the Borno State government's effort, because as I'm talking to you today, the free feeding program by the government is ongoing. They feed the children in school, that is in secondary school. The one for the primary school still is not yet being implemented, but they still try to support them by paying for their WAEC fees. They give them free school uniforms to a certain extent, and they try to also encourage the teachers to go and study more, and they try to raise their standard of living. But the teachers are complaining that there is imbalance between the local government, teachers teaching in local government, and teachers teaching in the state government. So the thing is giving them a kind of, there is this disparity between them. It's still imbalance because they are the ones in the local government where most of these children come from are least paid. Because I interviewed one or two teachers, they are still complaining that the 18,000 naira minimum wage has not been implemented. They are being paid as little as 8,000 naira per month, which is not sufficient. While those in the teacher primary school board are being paid up to 120,000 naira per month. So they feel that imbalance is affecting them drastically. That is on the part of teachers. But for parents here, they are still seeing it as very important that children should attend school. But they still, some of them are still not too keen about this Western education thing. They are more Islamic kind of Arabic school where their children attend to. But I want to remind you that most of this population and number that we're still talking about are children in the IDP camps where they don't have proper access to school. Some of them are still orphans. So to rehabilitate these children, for them to have somebody that will take care of them before they grow to a certain level is another problem. Because I cannot see somebody, the government having an orphanage where they will train all the children till they get to the university. It's going to be a very difficult task. That is where that is my own observation so far.
Absolutely, a very precarious situation there. Even where children are willing to go to school, we've heard from UNICEF that they've spoken with many of the kids that have faced trauma, violence, and all of that. And the single underlying point is they all want to go back to school. But then again, the question you even addressed earlier about the teachers, those in the rural areas are far behind when it comes to government even looking in their direction at all.
Exactly.
What kind of incentives are you seeing any at all to encourage these teachers, both the rural teachers in the remote areas, and of course their counterparts elsewhere in the same vicinity, of course?
Well, I tried to find out. They were talking about the funding, but they are talking of some areas are being paid more. The fund given to a particular local government is more than the other. So when they try to balance that, that kind of the children in southern Borno, where this Boko Haram insurgency is least affected them, the teachers there are more. Children attend school frequently and they are balanced. They don't have any problem issues there. Their schools are intact. They don't have much issues there. The teachers there are more. So the schools where in northern Borno where there are no teachers, they take their own salary and balance up with the ones in the south. So the few of them that are living or surviving now are back into Maiduguri in IDP camps. Some of them have been integrated to some little schools around. They are least paid. So they still have that issue lingering on. But the government is trying to balance them now. But up to now, they said for years now they've been trying to see that imbalance being corrected, but nothing has been done.
Is there any private sector intervention at all to help out? It is evident that government alone doesn't seem to be able to carry this weight on its shoulders, even if it has the capacity to.
Exactly. What I'm saying now is, for now, I know that UNICEF is intervening and assisting some of them. They train, they do in-house training for some of the teachers. They give them incentives in form of, I think, they give them some kind of learning materials and encouragement to, I think they give them some money too, to encourage the teachers that are teaching in such schools. That is what I have observed too.
All right, Hassan, let's bring you back. We're still expecting to establish links with the Commissioner of Education in Borno State, Inu Akubo, so we can hear from the perspective of government, what they're doing and the kind of challenges they're facing in rehabilitating these children there. We still have Hassan with us in here. Now, with this issue, you said earlier when you started that the situation in the north has been very dire when it comes to children enrollment in the school. Boko Haram only came to make it worse. Or make it worse, as the case may be. Now, with this effort so far, we're still seeing what some persons might call lackadaisical. Government is not very deliberate in the what implications will it roll out at the end, maybe in the next 5-6 years, when the rebuilding has, maybe when we've forgotten Boko Haram in the first place?
Well, if the current pace of rehabilitation and reconstruction in the Northeast remains at this level, we are not likely going to forget Boko Haram in the next 1, 2, or 6 years. Then it will also mean that the conditions for various kind of insurgent criminal groups to germinate has been created. And what this would mean is that the Northeast will continue to be an area of permanent crisis. Don't forget that we have Somalia, for instance, which is a country that has been in a permanent state of crisis for decades now. So that we must not even expect that things can improve if we do not sort out the questions of education, the question of the survivor, not just of the children, but all of the victims of the Boko Haram insurgency, because this is only on the basis of resolving the basic needs of humanity in that area that you can begin to undermine the influence of Boko Haram and begin to make people to realize that they have more, they have a stake in this society than what is it presently. Because the reality is that the social injustice, what has created Boko Haram and other insurgencies you see around. And why? We live in a society where the rich, a few of them, seem to get all of the resources of the country, while the vast majority are living, in permanent misery. Look at the question of the teachers' welfare in the Northeast, for instance. How can you continue to have a situation whereby the teachers who are expected to resuscitate public education in the devastated, conflict-ridden areas are paid less? They should have a right to hazard allowance. And this is actually an argument for the speedy and immediate implementation of the 56,000 minimum wage being demanded by labor. Because it is clear that without raising the living standards of the working people in this country, there is no way anything can be done. And where teachers are not well paid, where they are afraid of their own lives, of their own survival, they are not going to put their best to the job. And our children will continue to suffer. So that ultimately, what we need is a government that realizes that the public wealth is for the welfare of everyone.
All right. Hi. Thank you so much, Hassan Taiwo, for joining us on the program this morning. Hassan Taiwo is the coordinator, Education Right Campaign. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
And we also thank you, Kolome Dala, for joining us from Borno State, our correspondent in Borno State.
Yes, indeed. According to UNICEF, before we let you go now, investing in learning and education is an important way of combating extremism. That's where to start from. That's the foundation on which everything stands.
Exactly.